The moment the woman stepped onto the aircraft, the air shifted. The private jet shimmered under the soft glow of the afternoon sun, its polished silver skin gleaming like a promise of luxury. Inside, everything whispered exclusivity, supple leather seats, golden accents. The faint aroma of jasmine mingled with polished mahogany. Passengers moved through the aisle with the casual grace of people accustomed to indulgence, pulling designer luggage behind them and sipping champagne offered with precise care by the flight crew. Among them was Naomi Williams. She walked slowly, deliberately, with the quiet authority of someone who knew her place in the world, but didn't need to declare it. Her tailored navy blazer hugged her shoulders perfectly, matched by crisp slacks and understated jewelry that gleamed only when the light hit just right. She didn't sparkle like the socialites already seated, but she radiated something far rarer presence. She gave a polite nod to the junior flight attendant by the door, a young woman named Grace who returned the gesture with a smile that was polite but nervous. A few steps away, the lead flight attendant, Lauren, stood poised like a portrait in a gallery, flawless uniform, sharp jawline, and the kind of smile that looked more like a formality than a welcome. Her eyes flicked over Naomi in an instant, and her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome aboard," she said, her tone technically polite yet cold enough to frost a window. Naomi offered a soft, "Thank you," her voice calm, even warm. Then she moved past them, scanning briefly for her seat. She wasn't here for attention. She had business in another city, meetings to attend, decisions to make. But above all, she had come to travel in peace, Lauren. However, watched her longer than she had any other passenger. Just behind Naomi, an older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond, stepped in. Lauren's smile lit up like the flash of a camera. "Mr. and Mrs. Raymond, so lovely to see you again," she chirped, her voice suddenly full of warmth. Mrs. Raymond smiled back, clutching her knitting bag. Mr. Raymond offered a small nod, his newspaper already tucked under one arm. Naomi glanced back, catching the contrast in how Lauren treated them versus her. Her expression remained serene, but her eyes caught everything. As passengers began to settle in, Lauren walked through the cabin, straightening things that didn't need straightening, checking on champagne levels, fluffing pillows unnecessarily. She stopped by the Raymonds again, offering them another dazzling smile. "May I get you anything before we take off?" she asked, leaning in slightly. Mrs. Raymond shook her head, already beginning to knit. Mr. Raymond simply gestured toward his coffee, satisfied. But when Lauren passed Naomi's seat, her posture changed, her smile disappeared. She glanced briefly at Naomi's carry-on bag, tucked neatly beneath the seat, then looked away. No greeting, no eye contact, no offer of service. Just a dismissive walk-by as though Naomi's presence was inconvenient. Naomi didn't react. She simply folded her hands in her lap and waited. Have you ever felt someone's attitude shift toward you for reasons they never say aloud? Share your story in the comments and stay with us. This story is only beginning, and if you're enjoying it so far, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful moments like this one. Lauren circled back minutes later, her sharp heels muffled against the plush carpeting. She stopped in front of Naomi, her body angled just enough to seem official, yet her words betrayed her true intent. "Excuse me, ma'am?" she said, her voice laced with sugar and steel. "I believe you may be in the wrong section." Naomi looked up slowly, meeting her eyes with calm curiosity. "No," she replied. "This is my assigned seat." Lauren didn't budge. "This area is reserved for our elite passengers." Around them, whispers began to bloom like weeds. A woman with oversized sunglasses leaned forward, clearly eavesdropping. Across the aisle, a businessman glanced up from his laptop, eyebrows drawn in concern. Naomi kept her voice soft, but there was steel beneath it. "Then you should check the passenger list. You'll find my name there." Lauren's lips tightened into a flat smile. "There's no need. I know who belongs here." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. A murmur passed through the cabin. One passenger whispered, "If she's in the wrong seat, why doesn't she just move?" Another replied under their breath, "Maybe she's trying to sneak in for an upgrade." Naomi didn't flinch. Her hands remained folded, her posture relaxed, her voice remained the same firm, composed. "Call whoever you need to," she said. "I'm not moving." Lauren's jaw flexed. Her authority was being questioned and in front of an audience. She turned to Grace, snapping her name like a command. "Grace, escort this woman to the back." Grace hesitated, her eyes darted to Naomi, then back to Lauren. She didn't speak, but her discomfort was visible. Cheeks flushed, fingers clenched. Naomi gave her a gentle look, then shifted slightly in her seat. "I would think carefully before you do that," she said softly. Not as a threat, but as a warning. Lauren scoffed, "I know exactly what I'm doing." She turned back to the passengers, gesturing broadly as though presenting a case. "Some people think the rules don't apply to them," she announced, "but we have policies for a reason." Naomi didn't respond. She didn't need to. Lauren's voice cut through the growing silence. "Last chance, move or I'll call security." Naomi looked up, her expression unchanged. "I've already told you I'm not moving." Her words were calm, almost soothing, but unshakably firm. And that more than anything made Lauren's control begin to slip. The businessman across the aisle sat forward slightly, eyes narrowing. The woman with the sunglasses stopped whispering, her curiosity now tinged with unease. Naomi remained still. Her silence was louder than any argument. And though no one could see it yet, a storm was quietly forming, one that would soon shake the very foundation of everything. Lauren thought she knew about power, respect, and appearances. Lauren stood frozen for a moment, her authority openly challenged. She could feel the eyes on her. The businessman's silent disapproval, the socialite's thinly veiled amusement, and Grace's visible discomfort. But rather than retreat, Lauren doubled down. With a huff, she turned on her heel and walked down the aisle, her steps stiff, her pride wounded. Moments later, she returned with a tray of sparkling water, her expression carefully composed, but her motions clipped. Her hand trembled slightly as she offered glasses to the Raymonds, smiling brightly as Mrs. Raymond took one. With dainty fingers, Naomi waited. She sat calmly watching the scene unfold like a chess player, watching a predictable opponent make the next obvious move. Lauren moved up the aisle, offering drinks to the passengers in the back rows, one by one skipping over Naomi without so much as a glance. The tray grew lighter. Naomi remained quiet, finally only one glass remained. Her voice was soft when she spoke, measured, respectful. "Excuse me, may I have some water?" Lauren barely turned. "I'll get to you when I can," she said, her tone flat and dismissive, her body language screaming superiority as she brushed past. A beat of silence followed, the kind that wraps a room in invisible tension. The businessman across the aisle looked up, concern flickering across his face, but Naomi said nothing. Her eyes followed Lauren, not in anger, but in unsettling calm. A calm that was slowly unnerving everyone around her. Naomi adjusted in her seat, stretching one leg slightly into the aisle to relieve a stiff muscle. The movement was small, instinctive, harmless, but Lauren saw it and she made a choice. She turned sharply and altered her path. As she passed, her foot collided with Naomi's leg, sudden and deliberate. The tray tilted, the remaining glass tipped. Water splashed across Naomi's lap. A sharp gasp echoed from the nearby seat. Lauren's voice rose in theatrical outrage, feigning surprise. "Watch where you're putting your legs," she snapped. "You've caused a mess." All heads turned. Some passengers sat frozen. Others whispered to each other in disbelief. Naomi blinked, brushing the water off her trousers. Her voice, when it came, was even softer than before, but unshakably clear. "You walked into me," Lauren scoffed. "Maybe next time don't block the aisle." Naomi looked up, locking eyes with her. "I only asked to be treated with the same respect as everyone else," she said gently. "And if that's too much to ask, maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." The words struck like a stone tossed into still water. Quiet but impossible to ignore. Lauren's face turned crimson. She stepped closer, her voice no longer measured. "You think you can talk to me like that?" she hissed, then without warning, without hesitation, her hand lifted and struck Naomi across the face. The sound echoed like thunder in a church, gasps erupted. The businessman stood halfway up, eyes wide with fury. Grace clasped her hands over her mouth, her eyes filled with horror. Even the socialite sat back, no longer amused. Naomi didn't cry out, she didn't recoil, she simply straightened slowly in her seat, one hand resting lightly on her lap, the other smoothing her blazer. Her gaze never left Lauren's. It didn't need to. The entire cabin fell silent. You could hear the hum of the engines, the creak of leather, as someone shifted nervously. Then Naomi spoke. Her words were quiet, but they sliced through the air with the force of a blade. "You just made the worst mistake of your life. If you've ever witnessed a moment where silence spoke louder than shouting, you know how it feels right now." And if this story has you hooked, take a moment like this video, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful stories that reveal truth through courage. Lauren's mouth twitched, her pride, her position, her power, all suddenly fragile. Cross the line, she scoffed. You've been disruptive since the moment you boarded. Naomi didn't blink. She sat taller. I've been patient, she said, her voice firm now, but your behavior has crossed every line of basic decency. Lauren's fist clenched at her sides, knuckles whitening. You'll regret that, Naomi continued, her tone still composed, but now unmistakably commanding. Lauren opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time, doubt cracked her expression. From the galley, Grace watched silently, her hands trembling slightly. Her conscience tugged at her harder with every word, every glance. She could no longer pretend she hadn't seen. Naomi leaned back slowly, her posture relaxed, but something in her presence had shifted. A storm was coming. And it wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was quiet, inevitable. Without another word, Naomi reached for her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly, typing something brief and deliberate. Then she set it on the armrest beside her. Lauren stared at the phone like it might explode. What do you think you're doing? She barked, her voice laced with fear now. Naomi's eyes lifted. You'll find out soon enough. And with that, she turned her gaze back toward the window, as if Lauren was no longer worth her attention. What do you think happens next? Stay with us. The cabin had fallen into an eerie stillness. Passengers sat in a fragile quiet, exchanging glances, but saying nothing. Even the nosy woman in the oversized sunglasses now looked uncertain, nervously tapping her fingers against her armrest. The hum of the engines filled the space where words should have been. Then from the front of the plane, footsteps. Firm, purposeful. The cockpit door opened. The pilot stepped out, face-pale lips pressed into a tense line. His eyes scanned the room quickly, not for turbulence or a technical issue, but for something far more delicate. His gaze landed on Lauren. We need to talk, he said, his voice low but urgent. Lauren turned to him, clearly flustered, but still grasping at control. Captain, I'm handling a situation here. A passenger, the pilot cut her off. This is no longer your situation to handle, she blinked. Excuse me? The pilot's eyes moved to Naomi, then back to Lauren. I just received a direct call from headquarters. The owner of this aircraft is on board. He took a breath. And it's her. He pointed not vaguely, not hesitantly, but directly at Naomi. Gasps swept through the cabin like a gust of wind. She owns the plane, the socialite whispered in disbelief, her voice cracking with sudden clarity. Across the aisle, the businessman gave a knowing nod. I had a feeling, he muttered, as if everything now made perfect sense. Grace's hand flew to her mouth again, but this time not out of fear. It was awe, relief, vindication. Lauren, however, went completely still. The color drained from her face, her hands twitched by her sides. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She stared at Naomi as if seeing her for the first time and not liking what she saw reflected back. No, she stammered, her voice unsteady. That can't be right. There must be some mistake. The pilot's gaze didn't soften. There is no mistake, and I've been instructed to prepare for an unscheduled landing. Immediately, Lauren looked around, hoping desperately for someone to come to her defense. No one moved. The businessman crossed his arms, unimpressed. The socialite shrank into her seat, lips sealed. Grace looked down at the floor, unwilling to meet her superior's eyes. Naomi sat perfectly still, her posture dignified, her gaze unwavering. She hadn't raised her voice, she hadn't stood up, but she had shifted the air around her like gravity bending to will. Moments later, the captain's voice rang over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be making a brief, unscheduled landing. Please remain seated and buckle up. Whispers turned to murmurs. Confusion bloomed across the rows. Why are we landing? What's happening? Naomi didn't answer the questions around her. Her expression was serene, untouchable. When the wheels touched down, the landing was smooth, eerily smooth, like the calm before a storm fully breaks. Outside, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the plane's private ramp. Two assistants stepped out, impeccably dressed in dark suits, their movements precise and confident. They climbed the stairs and entered the cabin without hesitation. Miss Williams, one said warmly, inclining their head. Everything is ready for your review. Lauren stumbled back a step, nearly tripping over her own feet. The assistants ignored her. Do you need anything before we proceed, one asked Naomi with quiet respect. Naomi stood slowly. She adjusted her blazer with elegance, the motion unhurried, unbothered. Her presence filled the space like a rising tide, graceful, unstoppable. She turned, finally addressing the cabin. Her voice was clear, commanding. "I'm Naomi Williams," she said. "I own this aircraft, and I also happen to own the airline that operates it." A silence deeper than anything before spread like a wave through the jet. Lauren looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Naomi's eyes met hers. She didn't shout, she didn't sneer. Her voice cut sharper because it remained calm. "Your behavior today," she said, "has been nothing short of disgraceful." Lauren swallowed her voice, barely a whisper. "I didn't know who you were." Naomi lifted a hand. "That's exactly the problem." She stepped forward, not to threaten, but to reveal a truth far more cutting than punishment alone. "You didn't care to know. You didn't show basic decency, not because you knew who I was, but because you assumed who I wasn't." The passengers stirred, the reality sinking in with every word. "If this is how you treat someone you believe has no power," Naomi continued, "then you failed in the most fundamental part of your job, treating people with respect." Lauren's mouth trembled. "I made a mistake. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You didn't make a mistake," she said. "You made a choice, and now you'll live with the consequences." At that moment, the pilot stepped beside Lauren. "Miss Williams, what would you like us to do?" Naomi didn't even blink. "She's to be removed from this position, effective immediately." Lauren's world crumbled with that sentence. And still Naomi remained calm, still powerful, still in control. Lauren took a shaky step back, her lips parting to protest, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted around the cabin, searching for support in a crowd that now saw her differently. There was no nod of reassurance, no glance of sympathy, just silence. The same silence she had imposed on Naomi moments earlier, now mirrored back at her, amplified by shame. Naomi turned slightly toward the pilot. "Make sure it's official," she said firmly, "and make sure it doesn't happen again to anyone." The pilot nodded once, professionalism returning to his posture. "Understood, Miss Williams?" Lauren tried again, her voice rising in desperation. "Please, I didn't mean." But Naomi's gaze turned to her, cool and unflinching. "You didn't mean to get caught," she said, "but you did, and now, this is where that path leads." Before Lauren could respond, movement stirred near the aircraft's entrance. Two uniformed officers stepped inside the cabin. They moved with quiet authority, scanning the room before one of them stepped forward. "Miss Williams," the officer said respectfully, "we received your report. Are you pressing charges?" Naomi didn't blink. "Yes." Gasps echoed through the aisle once more. The officer nodded solemnly, then turned to Lauren. "Bryn, ma'am, you are under arrest for assault. Please stand and place your hands where I can see them." "Oh, wait, please." Lauren stumbled back, her voice breaking, now reduced to something brittle and hollow. "This is a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to." The second officer stepped in, taking her gently but firmly by the wrist, as the first produced a pair of handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent," he began. A hush fell over the passengers. No one looked away. Some raised phones, slowly recording, not out of cruelty, but as witnesses to truth, to justice. Lauren turned toward Naomi one last time, her eyes wide with panic. "Miss Williams, please, I'm sorry." Naomi stood motionless, her expression unreadable. "Your apology means nothing without accountability," she said quietly. "You made your choice the moment you raised your hand." The officers guided Lauren down the aisle. Her footsteps sounded heavier than when she had walked it with power. Now she was just a figure unraveling, drenched in regret, drowning in consequences. As the door closed behind her, Naomi turned back to the cabin. She faced the rows of passengers, most of whom sat frozen. Some in admiration, some in shock. "I want to apologize to all of you." Naomi began, her voice clear, but touched with warmth. "What you witnessed today is not the kind of experience I ever want anyone to associate with my airline." She took a moment, letting her words settle. "From this moment forward, we will do better. Everyone, regardless of appearance, status, or perceived importance, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." A beat passed, and then the cabin erupted in applause, a soft ripple at first, then thunderous. Mr. Raymond gave an approving nod, folding his newspaper with care. "Missy." Raymond set aside her knitting and clapped politely, a smile blooming across her face. Even the nosy socialite let out a breathy, "Wow," shaking her head in disbelief. Naomi turned to Grace, who stood a few steps away, eyes shimmering. "Grace," she said softly, I saw the way you hesitated, the way you wanted to speak up even when it was hard. You acted with restraint, but also with conscience that matters. Grace blinked, stunned. Thank you, Miss Williams. You'll be hearing from my office soon, Naomi added with a small smile. We need more people like you in leadership. Grace nodded, her cheeks flushing with gratitude. Moments later, Naomi walked toward the aircraft stairs. Her assistant followed beside her, tablet in hand, whispering something about meetings and schedules. But Naomi's mind was still with the people she left behind, the ones who had watched something shift today. Justice, once silent, had spoken. And sometimes it didn't need to shout. As she stepped onto the tarmac, the sun kissed her shoulders, and the air smelled of change, of endings and beginnings. And though she didn't say it out loud, Naomi knew this wasn't just a response to what had happened. This was the start of a new standard. A few days later, the footage had gone viral. Clips of the incident, Lauren's arrogance, the slap, Naomi's composed revelation flooded social media. But it wasn't the drama that held people's attention. It was the dignity, the silence, the power of someone who never needed to raise her voice to reclaim control. And then came the interview. Naomi sat beneath the soft studio lights across from a well-known journalist whose voice usually cracked through politics and power games. But today, even he seemed humbled. Miss Williams, he said, leaning forward with genuine interest, your story has captivated millions. What message do you hope people take from what happened on that flight? Naomi's posture was elegant, her expression poised, but behind her eyes was steel and strength. I think she began, her voice low and sure. We've confused respect with reward. We've treated dignity as something earned, not something owed. She paused. Respect, she continued, is not a privilege. It is a right. The interviewer blinked, visibly moved. And what would you say, he asked, to people who face the same kind of treatment but don't have your platform or your voice? Naomi looked into the camera, not at it, but through it, as if addressing someone she knew personally. Someone watching from their kitchen table or their bus ride home or a night shift break room, I would say. Your value is not determined by anyone's comfort, she said. Even when the world ignores your presence, you must never forget your power. You don't need wealth or status to demand dignity. You just need to stand in your truth and hold your ground. A long silence followed. Not awkward, Reverend? Then the host smiled, almost as if he'd forgotten it was a show. Thank you, Miss Williams. I think we all needed that. Weeks passed. Naomi returned to work, but not quietly. Within days, her airline rolled out a new internal initiative, the Dignity Standard, a complete overhaul of training programs, evaluation methods, and customer interaction policies. Employees were no longer judged on speed, but on empathy. Promotions weren't tied to looks, but to leadership. Every staff member, from baggage handlers to senior attendants, would receive a message from Naomi herself in their orientation video. In it, she said, luxury isn't in the seats or the champagne. It's in how we treat people when no one's watching. The message caught fire. I respect. Rank trended across social media. News anchors quoted her in morning shows. HR departments outside aviation even began referencing Naomi's leadership model. But for Naomi, the real change was quieter. On her next flight, she boarded a different aircraft, greeted by a new crew. The lead flight attendant, a tall man with kind eyes, smiled warmly as he extended a hand. Miss Williams, he said, welcome aboard. It's truly an honor to have you with us. Naomi nodded, accepting his gesture, not out of pride but peace. She took her seat, this time without tension, without scrutiny. Just a soft blanket folded neatly, a glass of still water, and the sound of quiet respect. As the plane ascended through layers of soft cloud, Naomi gazed out the window. Below, the world stretched wide and golden. Ahead, the sky opened like possibility. She allowed herself to breathe. The events on that flight had changed more than a policy. They had shifted a culture, because power isn't in volume and strength isn't always in resistance. Sometimes it's in the stillness. Sometimes it's in standing your ground with grace. Naomi knew now more than ever that her legacy wouldn't be built on profits or prestige, but on something far greater. The kind of quiet leadership that turns humiliation into a lesson and injustice into reform. She smiled to herself, her reflection faint in the window beside her. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a movement. If Naomi's story moved, you share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us because the world needs more voices like hers and maybe like yours too.